This episode of Arrays of Living discusses life as an equation, broken out into two parts. And that's a first for me. It's a mini-series, sort of, where I will present the full equation and then speak to the first portion of the equation today. What you'll then see is that in the following week, as its own podcast, I'll present the second portion of the equation to give you the full understanding of where I'm coming from. Now, typically in leadership, I always say to my teams, show me the numbers. And I say that because numbers are light, because they are reliable, they're unambiguous, and they help us to understand many things in the world. And many times they're structured into equations or algorithms to solve or prove something. So there is an evidentiary aspect to numbers that removes individual subjectivity. Equations range from simple to complex, and even the complex ones have their own range or extremes. So math, just like life, also has many ways to get to the same answer. Isn't it amazing how that works out? Numbers, equations, and algorithms are another lens into understanding the world, and life can be, it really can be, a series of equations. Now, my disclaimer, I am no mathematician. My natural inclination is the language arts rather than mathematics. However, I do deeply appreciate what mathematics has done for us and the real-life applications for math in our lives. Every day we do math in some way, shape, or form, not all of the time complex like a calculus or scientific, but we do math every day in our lives. And with this in mind, this episode discusses it from the perspective of life as if it were an equation. We are going to have fun. We're really going to have fun with this, or at least I'm going to try my darndest for it to be fun. And if nothing else, it makes for an interesting listen. And in my typical way, it will trigger new perspectives for changing lives. And interesting listen, isn't that what podcasts are supposed to do? And this is definitely a podcast. So let's get going and dive in, why don't we? Now, the full equation I came up with, notice I said I came up with, is T+W+A equals H+C. And because I'm no mathematician, I'm sure there might be a mathematician out there listening who might say, what in the world? Because they're now going to throw me some algebra and put in X, Y, and Zs, and I get all of that. But this is just me having a deep reflection on something that came across my desk. And when I looked at it and reflected on it, and I thought, well, you know what? This can be really simplified into an equation. So please don't get your knickers all tied up. It's just a way to present aspects and core aspects of life as if it were an equation. And I know I said that before, but I want to make sure that we know this, so I'm not getting comments and feedback that I'm out to lunch. I'm not a mathematician, but I do see some math aspects in core aspects that we need to understand. So let me repeat the equation again. T+W+A equals H+C. In this part one of this, I will talk about T, W, and A, and I will leave the equal H+C for next week's episode. So what does the T stand for? The T are your thoughts. Thoughts are products. Thoughts are conceived in our minds. So from my perspective, they're products of our minds. The active verb for thoughts is thinking. And the T is important because what you think directly influences how you feel and how you behave. So listen to this. If you think you cannot, you will feel like you cannot. You will behave like you cannot. And cannot will influence your actions, which then manifests cannot in your life. Did you get that? So let me do what I typically do. Let me repeat just so it reinforces and just so you can get it and just so you can hear it again for impact. So here we go. If you think you cannot, you will feel like you cannot, you will behave like you cannot, and cannot will influence your actions, which then manifests as cannot in your life. And I'll show what I mean by this by considering a child who thinks they cannot do math because it's hard, or because someone told them they couldn't do it, or someone said something negative to them and they actually it had an impression on them. Whatever the reason, but that child thinks they cannot do math. And that thought becomes how they feel. And we see that in their demeanor, their attitude, and their expression. Every time math comes up for that child, there's actually a physical response to the thought. Their body slumps. They start to procrastinate and they start to avoid. They play all these, pushback, delays, avoidance. And I know that there's listeners who are parents who are nodding their head and going, yeah, you got that right, Jen. And I know I do because I'm talking about my own lived experiences with my children, right? So you can relate, or at least parents can relate. And if you have a child in your life that doesn't like math, whether they're your own or your cousins or your niece or your nephews, doesn't matter. You can relate to this. And what happens when they start to say it and voice it and, turn all of that out? Then comes the poor grades. So the grades start to plummet. And when that happens, it reinforces the very thought and everything surrounding that thought. Now, the interesting thing with a child, when parents, tutors, or a teacher tends to step in and try to reframe the child's approach to math and their child's thinking around math, and they infuse their own appreciation for the subject. And suddenly, the child is modeling that perspective of math, and their performance improves, which results in different thoughts and different feelings and different actions and different outcomes. Their grades start to go up. And I know this, again, I say, from my lived experiences related to myself and my kids. It also happens if you're really strong in languages, and then you lean more your focus on that because you're good at it, and you don't put the focus on the math or the other subject. And then one starts to perform better than the other, right? So the same holds true for you. It holds true for me. I use the child example because I think most people can relate even when they were a child. But it holds true for us. Mindset is a fundamental component of our lives, and thoughts have a lot to do with our mindset. Because mindset is everything. If you have a shitty or a negative or a positive or an upbeat mindset, your life will reflect that, starting with your thought. Think about the negative person you're around, or, their life tends to reflect their negative mindset. Think about it. Think of a drama queen. I say queen, it could be because men can be dramatic too. But just think of the dramatic type of person in your life. Their life becomes dramatic. And the ones that, have upbeat, their lives are upbeat. And if you have a shitty mindset, people with shitty mindsets, nobody really wants to be around them. Think of then, you're going to see auntie or uncle this, and they have a shitty mindset, and you're like, I don't want to do this, But now, because it's going to be for a period of time, especially in family gatherings, it's going to be for a limited amount of time. So you go, you deal with it, and then you're so happy to leave. That's what happens when you have a shitty mindset. People don't want to be around. And if nobody's told you that, they're lying. Because I'm being very transparent. I don't want to be around people with shitty mindsets. I don't want to be around people who are negative. And I don't want drama in my life. So I don't want to be around people who are extreme dramatic. I accept you. I embrace you, but I don't necessarily want to be around that on a constant basis. But people that are positive, upbeat, optimistic, all of these things, a lot of fun, really, entertaining and really, embracing type of personalities, we don't mind being around. And these things reflect in your life. And the lesson of this is to watch or manage your thoughts. And yes, I recognize that's easier said than done, but it is a necessity for optimizing your life. The place to start is to honestly Honestly, evaluate how you feel most of the time. If you're mostly feeling down or incapable or something else, then consider there is a thought associated with the feelings. Question becomes, what is that thought? It's a simple question, except that it's not always simple getting to the answer. All our feelings have associated thoughts. So you've got to start by saying, how do I feel? But here's the challenge that we face. Now, according to healthybrains.org, brain facts, every day your brain processes about 70,000 thoughts. My goodness. Now, in my research, I saw the number stated as low as 6,000 and as high as 80,000 per day. I'm not sure who can claim to be the source of truth for this number, but even at the lowest count of 6,000, it's a lot of darn thoughts to weed through and manage. So when I say the lesson is to manage your thoughts and to watch your thoughts, that ain't so easy, is it? It's not so simple. And just as profound is the fact that only a fraction of the thinking that goes on in our mind actually reaches our awareness. And that is what is needed if we are to actually manage our thoughts, to optimize our life. So here's the first wowzy, mind-blowing push. And this is only the first letter in the equation. So get all settled in, because this podcast is going to be a hell of a podcast that is meant to get you in gear for a life overhaul or a life uptake. And moving on from the T to the W, T plus W, the W are your words. That's the next part of the equation, the W. It's your words, because words written or spoken are our way of expression. So when you have a thought, based on feelings, it goes into feelings and then you express it. So your thoughts lead to feelings, lead to expression through your words, either written or spoken. Now remember the proverb, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Remember that? Now, as children, we chanted that proverb. We really did, especially when being persecuted by other children and bullies. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And we'd stick out our tongues. Right? Because we feel all empowered. We feel good. You're not going to hurt me. But except the reality is that proverb sets you up. Because in my experience, words can definitely hurt us. And for many, they cut deep. They cut deep. My grandmother saying the words, my God, you're black and ugly. And not even that you're black and ugly, you're so black. My grandmother telling me those words cut deep. It took years of work, years of working on myself to get beyond that. There was a time I couldn't even say it without crying and getting emotional. See, thoughts, feelings, words. So words hurt, words cut, words cannot be taken back so easily. And what's even more enlightening is that broken bones heal. Words don't necessarily heal in the predictable way bones do, especially if the source for the hurt-based association is outside of our awareness. So imagine 70,000, even 6,000 thoughts going through your mind, and only a fraction of them you are aware of. And all the others are outside of your awareness. And yet they guide you through their feelings and through your words chosen. They guide you in your decisions in life, in your path in life. So if you don't get a hold of managing, get the skills, get the resources, get the tools to help watch and manage your thoughts and manage these things, many of which I call your shites. If you don't do that, then you're not necessarily being guided in the right way that serves you best. So that proverb is completely untrue. And Tony Robbins, who I studied under, was correct when he said, your outlook determines your happiness, not your circumstance. For me, I choose to replace his reference to happiness with contentment. Because I think what we should be striving for in our life is fulfillment and contentment. And then that leads to happy because contentment can be constant. The constant reflection of happiness is contentment and fulfillment. So yes, you can pursue happiness, but I really think what you're really pursuing is contentment. We can all find contentment in a tent. We can live in a tent and be very contented, but only if we apply a certain outlook or perspective to tent living. We see a lot of people downsizing to tiny homes. You need to have a certain outlook and perspective on tiny home living to be contented with a tiny home, right? So the other aspect is that the contentment derived from any circumstance, in this case tent living, will be present irrespective of our situation. Now, one person in the tent could be contented and another person miserable, even when both of them are having the same circumstance. And that's why Tony Robbins is that your outlook determines these things, not your circumstance. So the situations we face are over and above the outlooks we hold. However, the outlooks drive our words, and the T+W portion of the equation reminds us of that. Our thoughts feed our words. So our thoughts result in feelings. Our feelings result in words to express the feeling and to express the thought. Sometimes within our awareness, sometimes outside of our awareness. Our goal is to try to get as many thoughts into our awareness so that we can scrub out, reject, and manage the ones that aren't serving us well. Thoughts of love become feelings of love, which feed words and expressions of love. The same can be said for many other things, such as hate. Thoughts of hate become feelings of hate, which feed words and expressions of hate. Thoughts of anger become feelings of anger, which feed words and expressions of anger, and so on. Disappointment, sadness, it all comes down and can be pointed back to what's going on in our minds and in our heads. Now, as an author and master coach, words are paramount to what I do and to my craft. Words carry their own energy and power. They really do. Can you feel the energy from me as I speak? That's why I believe podcasting is such a powerful, because people sense your energy, people hear your energy, people are attracted to your energy through your words. So they carry their own, energy and empowerment. They can uplift or they can diminish. And my word selection is with the intention to guide, to uplift and heal. And do that even when tough love is necessary. Because sometimes the messages I need to get across needs to have a certain firmness with it, needs to, grab you and really entice you and influence you to choose you, to make a change in your life, a positive change in your life. So I go in with the intention through my words, through my energy in those words, through my animations as I'm doing this podcast, to connect with you in a very, very fundamental way, to invite you, support you, guide you, encourage you to fill the gaps that are in your life, to manifest differently for your life, and to take action and do the doing you need to do to get to where you want to be in your life. So let me ask you this. What are your intentions? And to what degree are our words a source of comfort to ourselves and others? Again, what are your intentions? And to what degree are our words a source of comfort to others and ourselves? That's another wow. That's another wow moment. Wowzy. Second one. So far, life as an equation is showing us that everything starts with our mindset, aka our thoughts. From my previous podcasts and articles, we also know that all our thoughts converge based on the universal law of divine oneness. And that law points out every thought, every action and event is in some way connected to anything and everything else. And when we think of that universal law, even if we're not fully bought into it, but just think about it. I don't need you to believe it. Think about it, that if that were the case, would you not be very careful about what you put out there? Wouldn't you be very careful about the thoughts you have and the actions you do and the events that unfold? Because you're impacting everyone else and everything. I think you would. I happen to believe enough in the human spirit. I happen to believe enough in the humanity of all of us that we would think twice about it if we thought about it. We probably don't do it because we may not feel we believe in the universal laws. But if we did, and we saw everything we think impacts me and someone else, and I'd be very careful about what I think, for sure. And on this journey I'm on, and I happen to be one that believes, I am careful about my thoughts. I can now hear when my thoughts and my energy drops, or my vibration drops. And I know when thoughts are coming into my head that I don't want them to be there, and I reject them. I'm getting better and better at it every day because of the journey I'm on. And I'm encouraging you all to come on this journey and understand T+W. Understand those things. The other universal law of correspondence teaches that what is occurring around us is a mirror reflection of what is going on within us. With this law, we learn to think as above, so below, as within, so without. The within is discoverable by our thoughts and feelings, and these are presented externally via our words and our actions. And that brings us to T+W+A. And A, which closes off the first half of the equation, right? It completes the left side of the equation. And the A just happens to stand for actions, because nothing happens for us without action. We cannot wish everything into our life. We can dream, we can wish, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to happen without us doing something. So we must do the doing to get the things that we are aiming for. We are told through the universal laws we deserve nothing. Nothing will just be handed to us. We deserve nothing. We must work for what we want, because nothing happens for us without action. And the active verb for action is doing. That's why I said do the doing. We cannot achieve anything if we do nothing. Work is required to achieve. And I know I repeated that many times, but I really need it to sink in. In fact, the goal of any action is to get a particular result. Action, by the very nature of it, is forward motion and is a foundational element for making progress and what many might call success. And what's interesting is making progress actually births and spurns motivation. Making progress motivates us. When we set goals, when we have aspirations, when we are looking down the road into our future and we are saying, this is where we want to be, this is what we want for ourselves. When we start to take the steps needed and we're making progress, we get motivated. It fuels us. An equally important aspect to know is that we are always in full control of our state. That's important to know that. Every time I use my gifts to speak and write, I'm having you discussions. I always say that. It's a you discussion, especially if the topic is relatable to you. You are in control, always. Always. And I can point back to prior podcasts, the decision-making beast podcast that talks about, we have decisions to make. That is what we do every day. We decide to get out of our bed. We decide to go to work. We decide to do a particular, role and field and study in a particular topic. We do decide that. And this ties back to that. You are in control always through your decisions and your choices. You always have choices. Even when it seems like you don't, you always have a choice. And decisions, not making a decision, is a decision. So we've already gone through this on other podcasts, but it's worth repeating here. Now, my coaching services come with a results guarantee. But here's the interesting thing. Getting to your breakthroughs requires your commitment to participate and to play and do the doing. So everything lands right back at you. So how much can I speak on action? I don't think I can speak on action much because it is guidance to do something. It's really that simple, guidance to do something. You have to decide to do the doing. I don't hold that. You do. So even when I'm coaching, when I'm speaking, when I'm doing anything like that, the decision still lies with you. So that's why I point out you are always in control. So action is guidance to do something, small if you must, big if you can. The universal law of inspired action, another one, is all about taking concrete, actionable steps to attract what we want into our lives. And the inspired portion of that law guides us inward. Remember, I talked before, as above, so below, as within, so without. And the inspired portion of the law of inspired action guides us inward because inspiration comes from within. And inspiration arising from you is a push to do something. When you get inspired, it is a push to do something. An inspired artist goes to their canvas and they paint. An inspired sculptor goes to their wheel and they sculpt, or whatever they do it. That's why we always use inspiration in correlation with artistry. An inspired cook goes to their kitchen and they make something. They make an amazing dish. Inspired action resonates as gentle and loving. At least to me it does, because it is inspired. It's a nudging of you. It's a nurturing of you from within. The within aspect of this law illuminates that not every action will be the right action. I wonder if you see that. Because if you're taking an action that has not been inspired from within, you are taking the reins and you are pushing forward, bulldozing and doing all of that, and it hasn't been inspired from within, it probably is not the right action. And I know this because I was there. I have pushed forward in my prior past, push forward, bulldoze, all excited. I'm going to do this. I'm going to counter, I'm going to surpass. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that. And I push. And lo and behold, what? Still ended up feeling unfulfilled despite building a career. So it isn't that I wasn't doing, right? But that what I came to realize and understand is that the actions that really count and really move us must be internally guided. Because in those days, when I looked to control life in my way, guess what? I eventually crashed and burned. And even before that happened, I encountered one roadblock, one obstacle after another. And what it was bloody hard to make progress. It was hard work. It was hard. And when it seemed as though I was making progress, I soon discovered it was not the progress I envisioned. I arrived at a place I didn't want to be. And I also looked around and realized that some of those around me was not my cheerleaders after all. Does any of this sound familiar to anyone? I have lived this. I have gone beyond it. And I got beyond it by seeking new resources and new tools and new people around me to be my cheerleaders, to be my support. And I can stand here now and I can argue and I can debate that I had been taking action. I was taking action. For sure I was. Except it was not the right action. Those actions were based on my own external constructs for proverbial success. And I put my hands up as I say proverbial success. Those painful lessons slowed me down, pushed me into solitude and stillness sufficiently to enable me to hear my internal voice, my God within, what I call my God spark, my internal divinity. And yes, I can honestly tell you it communicates with me, and I know it communicates with you. It communicates with all of us. Call it whatever you want. I call it, divinity, God spark, whatever religion you're in, we all have it. And yes, it guides. That's what we have to understand. It guides. And when you give it the permission and the surrender to guide you, it really does do it. And it does it more efficiently than when you're bulldozing and you are heading full force with your own desires, your own thoughts, and your own things that didn't come from within. Because that God spark guides us to act and achieve in different ways that are not hard. When we are taking inspired action, things come together in miraculous ways that we would not and never have fathomed on our own. And more importantly, the progress and the step forward is not hard. The right people fall onto our path. The seemingly abstract, nonsensical actions eventually connect in the strangest of ways. I can tell you that every day I live a miraculous life. Every day, because I let my divinity within guide me now. It wasn't easy getting to that. I had to learn, I had to grow, I had to commit, I had to do. But I was always doing anyway. All that has changed is I want to do the right actions. And how this gets translated, so listen to this. The money you did not have to do the thing you needed to do suddenly appears to ensure you can do the thing you need to do. Those are the sorts of things that happen when you are divinely guided. And many call it divine intervention. Imagine that. And know what? It probably is. So my message is to get going and get doing based on your intention to achieve your purpose-driven outcomes. Because the intended outcome is important because it takes us to the right side of the equation, which you'll hear about in the next week's podcast. And I'll leave you there, and hopefully you've enjoyed this session enough that you will come back and listen to next week's session to complete the equation. And here's what I always have to say. If you need help with any of this, thoughts, feelings, words, action, T+W+A. If you need anything with that whole side coming together, then please reach out. Well, if not to me, to somebody else, but to someone who has your back, who will mentor, guide, and support what you're trying to get done. And you can reach out to me using the links in the description, and I am more than willing to have a chat. So please, if you know. And the last thing I will say before I wrap up this part 1 of Life as an Equation is the last thing that I will say is if you love this podcast, which many, many, many of you are telling me you do, then please share the love, subscribe, download, and pass it on for others to hear and listen, because in 2023, it is all about, and this year it's all about impact and really going exponentially out to you, and for the mentoring that I am so tuned in to do and achieve. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for listening to this episode of Arrays of Living. And please be sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You will also find in the description below my email address should you want to reach out, and I am happy if you do. And just to be sure, it's jen@youareworthmore.co, and worth more you definitely are. And lastly, also see the link that will allow you to schedule a meet and greet with me. And that's an opportunity for me to meet you and you to meet me, and for us to have a chat. And that would be wonderful and welcoming. So please hit the link and let's set up a meet and greet.